All righty. Thank y'all for bearing with me for a minute. I had to get some photos ready for today, guys. We've got a series of two actually on very short notice. I'm glad because they happened to, well, our guest for Monday happened to see our interview with Mr. Howard Sugar, and he was one of two Covey pilots flying the day of RT Washington's Halo mission. And today we have the second pilot who was flying with Mr. John Plaster as his front seater with him. And not only did he fly SOG missions with the 20th task, but if I'm getting my stuff correct, he also flew out of NKP. He helped during the Lam Son 719 incursion. But before SOG, he flew Ho Chi Minh trail interdiction missions that were pretty hairy. And I'm going to really hand it over to our guest today, Mr. Glenn Wright, and let him tell you about himself. And we'll get into some questions and some story, guys. So, Mr. Glenn, thanks for joining us, and the floor is yours, sir.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bud. In terms of my Air Force career before then, it was relatively short because Vietnam was my first assignment out of pilot training. Actually, to go back a little bit further, I entered college in 1965. Was getting a degree in at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. My degree is in aeronautical engineering, and I joined Air Force ROTC. My goal in life at that time was to become an Air Force test pilot. So took aeronautical engineering, joined Air Force ROTC, and about a year into my stay there, I was getting good grades. And of course, the Vietnam War was kicking up, full steam by that time, and the Air Force was starting to kick out about 3,000 new pilots a year. And Air Force came to me and said, "Hey, Cadet Wright, how would you like a scholarship? All you got to do is give us 4 years after pilot training." I said, "Sure, sign me up." So that's how I went through Air Force ROTC and wound up going to pilot training at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. Got through there, finished fourth in my class there, and wound up getting an O2 assignment to Vietnam. Came into Pleiku around November. Finally got there in November of '70, and they gave us an option. They gave us a couple of introductory missions. You can fly day missions in Cambodia. You can fly night missions in Laos. And I decided to fly the night missions in Laos, doing night interdiction missions, where we'd fly with two-man crew at night in the O2, flying over the Ho Chi Minh Trail, looking for trucks. And it was pretty low tech, but the beginning of high tech. Let me put it that way. We had a guy sitting in the right seat who's either a pilot or a navigator, hanging out the right window with a starlight scope looking for trucks. And at first, we tried to drop parachute flares and talk to fighters so the fighters could see the trucks, but that turned into be very difficult to do. So the next tactic we've worked on was dropping what we call log markers, which is basically a big flare, but it didn't go off till it hit the ground. And so we try to straddle the trucks or a truck park with the log markers, and then talk the fighters into into the target. Uh, and yeah, some of the things you think about at flying night missions, the weather was always important. Uh, if you had a cloudless sky and a nice bright moon, that was good hunting for trucks because we could almost see the trucks with the full moon without the starlight scope. So that was really good mission weather for us. Bad mission weather for us was a high overcast, a high cirrus clouds with a full moon, and that's what we called the gunner's moon because we were flying blacked out, but the gunners could see us silhouetted against the high overcast. But yeah, a lot of the missions it was completely dark, and we'd be flying blacked out, and we'd be circling the target in a kind of right hand orbit, and talking to fighters and essentially giving them free range and where they could pull into the target, pull off, and just tell them what side of the target we were on. And one night I was doing that with a set of F4s, and I was west of the target, and F4 pulled off right into us. Of course, we couldn't see each other, but we felt him go by. He was so close. But that was, yeah, some of the interesting aspects of the night mission. A lot of time you were flying on basically just on instruments and looking and having the guy in the right seat look at the ground. In the middle of that, the night interdiction missions, I got tapped to go to Quang Tri TDY for 6 weeks. And we were essentially doing the same thing for the Vietnamese army when they invaded Laos in Lam Son 719. And I was there for 6 weeks on that particular fiasco. And that was my education into how difficult the situation was in Vietnam, because we were giving the South Vietnamese every bit of tactical air that they could possibly use. And basically, they got their butts kicked for 6 weeks. People also got their butts kicked where we couldn't put ground troops in there, though I suspect the recon teams were in there to some degree. But the Army helicopter pilots from the 101st Airborne were the people ferrying them in and out. And back 1998, when my daughter was in high school, she did a semester on Vietnam history, and she had to do a term paper. So she was looking for a topic, and I suggested to her Lam Son 719. And this is before Google or before real sophisticated searches were out there, but she managed to find the after action report of the 101st Airborne Division for that mission. And that was such a hairy mission for the helicopters that in that 6 weeks, every single UE aircraft commander got shot down at least once. That's how difficult that particular mission was. At any rate, that mission was over. I came back to Pleiku, and then I got tapped to fly the SOG missions, which for me, in my 6-year Air Force career, the 6 months I spent flying with SOG was I think, the high point of my Air Force career. I had never met a group of more dedicated, brave, ferocious warriors in my life, and it was an honor for me to serve with them and do what I could to keep them out of trouble. And that kind of gets us, I guess, to the actual mission at hand, the Halo mission. I was actually on what was my last mission of my first tour in the Vietnam War. And I woke up that morning, I looked outside, the weather was absolutely dog shit. I mean, it was 200-foot ceiling, low visibility, rain. We were in the basically the aftermath of a typhoon that had come on shore. So I figured, well, I guess I'm done. Then I got a knock on my door, and Plaster said, "Hey, Glenn, we're going to go out and fly. We got a lost recon team out there." So we get on the flight line, hop in the plane, up in the O2, take off. We're immediately in the clouds, and I'm flying basically on a TACAN vector out to where what I later found out was Paul Coors was flying over the recon team. But there was no way we could get down to them. We were in the clouds the entire way out to where they were located. So what we had to do is we flew back to Pleiku, flew a precision radar approach into Pleiku, broke out at 200 feet above the ground, low visibility. I figured with that bad visibility, there was almost no possibility that you could even dive to put in a rocket pass with only a 200-foot ceiling. So we had somebody from Cubby Ops bring an M16 out to us with a bunch of ammo, and we were going to try to be a mini AC-130 with Plaster shooting the M16 out the right window. So we took off on the second leg of that mission, and again, we took off this time what's known in air traffic control parlance as special VFR. Clear the takeoff, clear of clouds, and you're on your own. So we stayed below this 200-foot ceiling all the way out to where the team was, and the weather was so bad that it was raining hard enough I couldn't see out front through the windscreen out front. Well, in order to keep us from hitting anything, I was looking at the side window and just making sure I was over the road. So Plaster's in the right seat navigating. We take the road west out of Pleiku, and we get to the Playtrap River, and we hang a right up the river. He's navigating all the way, and all the time it's we're under a 200-foot ceiling. It's raining like crazy. Like I said, we can only see out sideways. We couldn't see ahead. But he's navigating us out towards where the team is. And we get out there, and I later found out it was Paul Kors I was relieving. Didn't find that out until a reunion in 2006 when we started talking about old hairy missions we were on. And he's basically out of fuel, so he's coming out the same valley that we're going in, and rocks wings as we pass each other. And we at that time Sucker Hole had opened up over the team, and the helicopters were in the area and were able to get down and start the pickup. And Plaster's on the radio with both the team and the helicopters, and they're starting their pickup, and successfully got the team out. And at that point, what I didn't want to do is pop out of the side of the Sucker Hole and run into one of the helicopters. So I had to throw in the throttle, and the O2 does not have any zoom capability. I mean, it is a dog when you're trying to climb. It's completely overweight. We always flew all of our missions at over the civilian gross weight, so it doesn't climb very well, but we had to get at least above the hillsides of the valley we were in. So I jammed in the throttle and pulled straight ahead over the river valley until we got in the clouds again, and then pulled away from the Recon team's site, and get back up in the clouds. We fly back to Pleiku and do another precision approach, break out under a 200-foot ceiling and land. Another easy day at the office in the O2. So that was kind of that mission. Then I had some more years in the Air Force after that I can tell you about if you're interested. But if you have any questions about that particular mission, now's a good time to talk about it.
Oh yes, sir. We'll cover what you've discussed a little bit here. And guys, you're always asking me, considering the library here I've got behind me and all of that, what all I'm reading, and what are some good books and everything. I didn't even put it together because it's been so quick since me and Mr. Glenn and Mr. Paul have been speaking. And here I didn't even start to look in CCC books or SOG books to see if Mr. Glenn is name checked in the back of the books. And sure enough, Mr. Glenn is in Mr. John's second tour, or his personal tour book, Secret Commandos, and he is name checked beginning on page 336. And as a matter of fact, we'll kind of go backwards here since we last spoke about you were last speaking about the mission here, the Halo mission. What's interesting, he started off, if y'all heard, he said the weather was absolute dog shit. Now this is for the mission, the weather was dog shit, and I'm gonna bring up a photo, and if y'all remember from Howard's interview, him talking about what it was like on the ground and how wet it was. But on page 336 it begins, and this is one of the mess ups, and Mr. Howard has mentioned, because we spoke, that's what I was saying, me and Mr. Howard spoke, and they actually went up twice before this day on the C-130 and were poised and ready to jump, and it was called off the last minute 2 times in a row. So third time was the charm, and they were Howard and them basically said they were jumping no matter what. The jump masters were going to have to hold them in to keep them from jumping out of the plane. But it mentions designated RT Wisconsin. That's incorrect. It's RT Washington. Led by First Class Richard Moose Gross, which Mr. Gross's son Scott's on here a lot. I would hope he's in the comments here soon. but he was the former RT California 10, and this is his third SOG tour, which is amazing. Got photos of him, and it also includes Mark Gentry, which we're about to hear about and we've heard about a bit, and Bob McNair. Mark Gentry had a prior tour at CCN and was now with RT Montana, and strap hanging because of his jump abilities, because he went on to Delta Force and served with the Golden Knights. But Howard, Charles Baylor, another Montana man, and 5 yards. So they jump off into absolute dog shit weather, as the guys would say. And Mr. Glenn leaves play coup, Covey 593. That's his designation in the O2. And they're around the old Duco Special Forces camp, and they start getting ready. And that's all of a sudden when the code word goes that the jumpers are clear and it's going. And that's really when all hell starts to break loose, if you can say that. As questions are coming in, what was that like? You mentioned, you and Paul passed, or you passed him because he was bingo on fuel, and y'all had gotten the car 15, if I can remember, because y'all are about to make gun runs. What what was going through your mind, and what was Plaster talking? What was y'all's conversation like, knowing the proverbial shit had hit the fan?
Well, we knew the team was in trouble, and I knew we had to hang it out if we were going to get out there and help them at all. We didn't, Plaster and I didn't have a whole lot of conversations while we were heading out there, because we were just concentrating on avoiding the ground. He was navigating and I was flying. He'd tell me when, like I said, we flew down the highway from Playco, west out of Playco, and then up the river valley, the Play Trap River, and he was navigating all the way, and because he knew where the team was, and I was just trying to keep us off the nearby terrain and out of the clouds, so we could see enough of the ground so we knew we were clear, clear of terrain. It was by far the hairiest. I flew a number of hairy missions during my 2 tours in Vietnam, but that was number one on my hairy mission list.
And I find it funny there, you guys are at the reunion, and Mr. Paul mentioned this as well, saying there we are sharing old war stories, and it comes up what's the hairiest, and he starts telling his, and he said, you start looking around and it's like, I was on that mission, and there y'all didn't even know it until then.
Yeah, because that was my last mission, and as we had a kind of tradition for your last mission, your Finney flight, you'd get met when you came back, and you get a bottle of champagne dumped over your head, and you have a few drinks, and next day you're in an airplane flying to Da Nang to fly out of country. So there wasn't a whole lot of conversations about what was going on out there, and because of the nature of the SOG mission, we didn't talk about it too much. It was that was a top secret mission. We didn't even. The interesting part is, pilots, we didn't know what those guys were doing, and we didn't know what the results of their missions were. I suspect you've heard this from them before, but that SOG mission was so secret, their intel didn't even go directly to MACV, because they were concerned about intelligence leaks. That mission, the SOG mission, from what they told me, was briefed directly to the White House every day, and then the whatever intel that came out of it would come back downhill to MACV.
That's amazing. The stuff y'all are doing is like that. Now, a question about that will come up, but I mean, it's those guys, those of y'all that have read the book, I mean, it's an absolutely amazing event, and hearing Howard talk about it. But I mean, from the moment they account for everyone, and people are bunched up. Moose, Gross, and Mr. Howard get together, and I'm about to show a photo, and we've heard the backstory behind that. But immediately Gentry is alone, and he thinks he can link up with Moose, and that is not possible immediately because he hears movement. And if I'm not yes, he actually that's when Mark radios to Plaster, and he says, whispers, Plastic Man, I've got movement, enemy movement 40 meters away. And that's when it all gets going. And when you guys get on station, we're joined by Terry Cadenback. That's great, a CCC veteran, Hatchet Force veteran. When you guys are on station, you've got your Willie Pete's, you've got the rifle. Do y'all immediately do you immediately find Mark, and are y'all going after the troops in contact with him, with Willie Pete and the gun, or what's y'all's first mode of action on station?
Yeah, that was Paul trying to go after him with Willie Pete's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are y'all in recovery? What's going on?
We were on our way out there by that time. Plaster was in contact with those guys, but we were on our way out there basically to relieve Paul because he was out of fuel.
Dangerously, as we find out.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Can you remember what y'all spend a lot of time in a bird in a day. Do you remember how long from the time you and Mr. Plaster get on station until you figure out everything's good to go, or you're either told you can get off station and go about what you're doing, or head back to Khartoum? Or
Actually, the mission, the two sorties I flew on that mission were both fairly quick. Paul was out there most of the time, and I was out there to replace him as he was out of fuel. But essentially, we flew out to the LZ, or the drop zone, twice from Blake Hill. It's a fairly short flight, short but hairy. So I don't think we logged more than total on both sorties, not even an hour's flying time that day. It was all in the weather, and it was all, and the second sortie was all close to the ground and in the weather. And really,
there's
Plaster was the guy who was in contact with the team all during this period of time. I had nothing to do but fly, because there was no way we were bringing any fighters in, so I didn't have to contact the ABCCC and get fighters, because there was no way anything like that was happening that day. I don't think, if I was to guess, the weather was so bad in Vietnam that day, we may have been the only aircraft in the air that day.
Gosh. Were you able to kind of check out the AO and see how bad, or how what the terrain looked like in the Ia Drang? What they were in? How bad was it?
I was up close and personal to it. I mean, I was, that's the only way we were able to keep us from hitting the hillside on either side of the river valley.
When you finally did get on station, were you able to see guys in the bush, either NVA or team?
No, by the time we actually got out there, the helicopters were in the process. We got close enough to where they were. The helicopters had found a sucker hole, and they had gone down there, and they were starting to pick up the whole team.
Wow.
And my conversation with Plaster at that time was, are they out yet? Are they in the helicopters? Are the helicopters airborne? Do they have everybody? And I probably asked them that a half a dozen times, and said they're working on it. They're working on it. And we hadn't quite gotten out there yet. Actually, we were still flying up the river valley. And as soon as he said the last guy was in the bird coming out, that's when I decided we had to get out of there without actually getting to where the team had been on the ground. Because my big fear was that we were going to pop out the side of a sucker hole and hit one of the helicopters as they were taking off. And that would have been the biggest disaster of the day. So as soon as I heard from Plaster that the last guy was in the helicopter and the helicopters were off the ground, I jammed in the throttle and we zoomed. Well, the O2 doesn't zoom very well. We, I started the maximum climb we could possibly have out of the O2 for a few seconds straight down the valley, so where I knew we wouldn't hit anything, and then I turned away from the valley, not knowing exactly what the terrain was around us. But to me, it would have been better if we had hit a few trees at the top of the hills rather than hit a helicopter, coming out in the middle of the evacuation.
That that the weather must have been. I mean, that's terrifying. There's
That
a
was
yard.
probably the worst weather I flew in my 6-year Air Force career. I had one
Oh,
other fairly hairy landing out of a thunder in the in a thunderstorm one day. I was in the following year when I was flying a small passenger jet for the Air Force. But that was those two missions were the closest the weather gods came to slapping me out of the air.
that's that's terrifying, and especially in a O2. I mean, anything flying in anything bad weather, but especially in O2. There's Mark and Moose getting ready for training, but gosh, that I mean, and you guys in the bird dogs and all that, or all of them, the OV10s as well. I mean, you guys would push those babies to the limit. I mean, it's amazing what y'all could do with them. That leads to a question. We're going to be kind of weaving our way here, and I apologize about that. But Jason's curious, since Mr. Paul, the mechanic, the aircraft maintenance officer or what have you, when he got back, said you're lucky you made it back here. He was so low, which leads to Jason Holmes asking how. Oh, geez, look at me asking the wrong one. Did you ever have any moments where you uh getting back to base where you almost ran out of fuel? I guess he's asking, did you ever get close to running out of fuel trying to get?
Not on this mission because this was a couple of short missions, but yes, I did have one where uh, I actually flamed out the rear engine. I was so low on fuel. That was one of the night missions over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Stuff was happening, and you kind of stretch it out, and you stretch it out, and you stretch it out, and yeah, well, I lost fuel supply to one engine about a half-mile final one night.
And you know, how does that? I mean, it's just you spending so much time with that bird that you. I mean, I know the gas gauge is there, but I've heard from guys that
You never
the
believe the
gas
gas
gauge.
gauge.
I was about to say the gas gauge ain't the tell all thing of it.
No.
Is it just so much time y'all spending that bird knowing
Yeah,
it's
it's really a time of flight thing, and you know how far you can push it, and sometimes you have because stuff's going on, you push it to the limit, and yeah, I had one night mission where I was coming, interdiction mission over the trail where I pushed it a little bit further than I should have.
yeah night missions and
That's
louse. Geez.
yeah, part of that is being a young stupid lieutenant.
So with and Jason, we'll get to that question about knowing the guys. But with the Ho Chi Minh Trail missions, you mentioned this was either another pilot or another navigator. Are y'all are y'all explicitly looking for trucks? Are y'all looking for troop uh gatherings that y'all can see lights or
It was pretty much all trucks because you'd see their lights.
okay?
And they kind of shielded their lights, but with the starlight scope, you could still see them. Yeah, they needed enough light to see driving down the road, and and the starlight scope illuminated that enough so we could see the dots moving on the road. That's
Now
essentially what we were seeing: dots moving on a road.
now, you did fly them, but did you take some time in the opposite role of dropping flares and log markers?
Oh yeah,
Or you did?
that's how we blew the trucks up. We'd yeah. The, the guy in the right
Did
seat be looking out, and we'd drop the log markers around the trucks and then talk the fighters into it. It wasn't. realistically wasn't all that effective. It slowed them down. The ones that really took care of the trucks about probably a couple of months into my night interdiction missions, the AC-130 started to come out,
Oh
and
yeah.
they had the gear to actually start blowing up trucks.
Oh yeah.
They made a difference.
We've had he was in every special forces event from after the Sante raid post Vietnam era till 2000 or so. Bill Walt Bill Walter, yeah.
Yeah,
And he wrote the AC-130 history on Vietnam and then his years. And it's absolutely amazing what those AC-130s were doing on the trail with
yeah.
truck kills. I mean, it's wild. I mean, they were raining down
You
hell.
brought up something very interesting, the Sante raid. I actually briefed for a follow-up mission to the Sante raid in Laos. We had a preliminary brief, and I believe if I remember right, it was probably like August or September of '71. I can't remember exactly the date. And it was supposed to be a rescue mission for POWs in a high altitude karst in Laos. And the local UEs couldn't get that high, so they brought in some twin engine Air Force UEs, the UH-1N model with twin engines. And so we're having this preliminary briefing, which was supposed to be the day before we went off. And I remember the Army Major Special Forces guy briefing us, and he asked the Air Force contingent of helicopters. I think it was a captain, in leading that group. His question on what's your acceptable loss ratio for this particular mission, and of course the Air Force captain says 0. We don't want to lose anybody. Well, the Special Forces major said we figure it's 25%, so take that many extra helicopters with you. And we took, and there was two of us FACs that were briefing for it. I was a primary, and there was another guy who was going to be my backup. And the sad thing about that one was we were supposed to do the final brief the following day, find out exactly where the target was, find out all the, what we knew about the terrain and anti-aircraft fire and what units might have been around there, and get the final brief the following day. And we show up for that, and they said, "Oh, they moved them." So, you know, intelligence leaks killed a lot of people. Because at that point in the Vietnam War, we were talking about potentially hundreds of POWs, MIAs lost in Laos.
Mhm.
And at the end of the war, I think we got uh, less than 10 back. I don't remember what the exact number was out of Laos. So, and that was one of the things that plagued the SOG mission at the end: intelligence leaks.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bad guys knew they were coming too many times near the end of the war.
Oh, I mean, we've heard terrible tales of, I mean, them literally knowing the RT's name, who was on it, calling out
Yeah,
names and dates of birth and the whole nine yards. So yeah, and I hate sounding brash, but they say it themselves. It's a wonder more of them didn't get killed and they had as many successful missions as they did with the leaks that were going on in Saigon.
yeah,
Mm, mm.
yep.
Um, Jason, good question. How well did you get to know the men who were running Recon and Hatchet Force missions while you were flying?
Actually, not that well. I mostly dealt with the Cubby Riders. They would come stay with us at Pleiku, and we'd occasionally stay overnight with them in Khartoum. And we had a few beers with the RTs, but didn't I didn't know any of them really well, other than the guys I flew with. Plaster, I flew with Carpenter, I flew with uh, Six Pack. I'm trying to remember his real name.
Larry White.
Yeah, White. Yep. Those are the three guys that I flew with on a pretty regular basis.
Yeah, the three of the best. There's Larry on the left, and there's Ken Carpenter right there, shoebox, and
Yep, shoebox. Yeah, I remember shoe. I flew with quite a. I'd say mostly with Blaster, second with Shoebox, and third with White.
Wow. Three, I mean, in all the books, and anytime you speak to anyone that knew, I mean, you can tell Mr. Larry's voice, but that knew they were in the air, they felt in great hands. I mean, they were solid 1-0s, and it translated well for them up in the air, watching out
Yeah.
for the guys. That's a
I
great.
remember Shoebox really. I remember hearing some of his stories, and he really impressed me. He had been there for basically the entire war. I think I was told by one of the other guys that he'd been there for like 7 or 8 years by this time in 71. And he had only been gone for 6 months when they told me he was the NCO, the chief NCO advisor to the Bolivian team that captured Che Guevara.
Mm, yep.
That's what I was told about him. He's
This
an
man
amazing
right.
guy.
Absolutely. He and Larry White were in Omega before the projects transformed into SOG, and Lowell Stevens as well, Round Eye. They were
Yes,
there
Round
forever.
Eye. Yeah, I flew a few times at Round Eye also with Stevens. Yep.
I mean, and I believe this is at the KKK, the Covey Country Club. Um,
Yeah.
but the absolutely outstanding men, and thank God. Every time we talk to men that were on the ground, they say thank God for the pilots and the Covey riders, because they saved countless lives with what y'all were doing, putting y'all's rear ends in
Well,
the fire every time you went up.
like I said, I had so much respect for what they were doing. It was a privilege for me to be associated with them and to be find support for them.
Eh,
That was of my 6 year career. That was definitely the high points of my 6 year Air Force career.
We can see why with the legends you served with and with the mission you were accomplishing. Did you know a Captain Stephen L. Bennett?
I did not, but I knew people who knew him because I was in that squadron in the 23rd Tactical Air Support Squadron the year after he died. So I heard lots of stories about him and why he got the Medal of Honor, and I met his widow at some reunions. Did not know Steve personally, but a lot of guys I flew on my second tour with knew him very well.
Wow, this is his grandson, and he's trying desperately to find some men that knew his grandfather, and
I
could
would
tell him.
suggest he look up a guy by the name of Daryl Whitcomb.
Daryl Whitcomb.
Daryl Whitcomb. Uh, he was a nail, and he had flown Ravens before
Oh,
being a nail.
I know that name now.
And I'm pretty sure Daryl knew Steve.
We're getting close, Jake. We're getting close.
And if
Okay,
Daryl did, I'm pretty sure Daryl knew him, and uh, and he probably knew some other guys that knew him.
excellent.
Yeah,
Wow,
that
that
yeah yeah. The Steve went down in the year that between my two tours.
okay. Okay. Wow. That's amazing, because we've been trying to get someone that at least knew him or was good friends with him, and at least we've gotten someone who at least
Another
knows of
guy
him.
you could look up, and I can't remember his name because I only met him at a reunion. About the same time that Steve Bennett went down, that was the Bat 2-1 rescue. And that was a big squadron mission for about 7 days, trying to recover Bat 2-1. They never could get him, and they had to send a Navy SEAL in to take him out by a boat. But I met the first O2 pilot who contacted Bat 2-1 on the ground at a reunion. And I don't know his name, but you can probably find his name somewhere. He was definitely there at the same time as Bennett. And that guy had an interesting career too. I can't remember his name, but I remember talking to him at a reunion in 2006. Uh, he was another lieutenant on his first combat tour out of pilot training, and he put in good, solid Air Force career, both on active duty and reserves and National Guard. He flew A-10s in the first Gulf War,
Oh, wow.
and his A-10 unit was getting disbanded or sent someplace else, and he wanted to put a few more years in, so he volunteered for B-52s in the reserve. So he was flying
Wow.
B-52s in the reserve, and he was scheduled to retire in October of 2001. Of
Oh,
course, in September of 2001, we know what happened. So he got extended for a few more years, and he wound up flying expending ordnance out of B-52 in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I would bet that he was the only Air Force pilot, maybe the only military pilot, who's expended ordnance in 4 wars.
wow.
Because that
Holy.
Bat-21 rescue was like a year and a half into the beginning of his Air Force career, and he got extended through the first years of Iraq and Afghanistan. I
I
don't know
think
his name though. I met
I
him
think
once at a
I've got the
reunion in
bat. I've got
2006.
I think I've got the rescue the book Rescue of Bat-21 that I'll scurry through and see if I can find it. I'm sure we can find it.
The real
Um,
history of Bat-21 was a book written by Daryl Whitcomb.
I think that I've got that, and that's why
Yeah, and
Daryl's
that
name.
gave the full story. And the interesting part of that with with my career also, I almost got shot during Lam Son. I almost got shot down within miles of where Bat-21 was shot down.
Oh,
I
wow.
I came like 3 or 4 feet, a 4 shots of a what I can only consider was a radar controlled 85 missed me
Oh,
by about 4 feet on a night mission there, within miles of where Bat-21 was shot down by Sam.
dang. That's terrifying. God.
When I did the math on that one, I figured my forward speed. I mean, the gunner had me tracked perfectly. Uh, I missed getting shot down by about 200th of a second.
That,
My forward velocity was about 150 feet per second, and didn't miss me by more than about 3 or 4 feet.
They, the good Lord, was
You would not be talking to me then if I was 300ths of a second faster, because that would have blown me out of the sky.
my God. Jake was curious. Do you know if Mr. Bennett went across the fence on missions?
I'm pretty sure he did. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure he did, because that's what they were flying up around the DMZ and and Laos. Um, uh, yeah, that again, you got to talk. You'd have to talk to guys that were in both the 20th and the 23rd TAS at that particular time. 23rd flew completely out of NKP, so they were in Laos all the time. But the war got so mixed up at that time. That was during the spring offensive. That whole area around the DMZ and the Laos border. I'm I, I'm guessing that both squadrons were doing missions over that entire area.
Wow. Okay, we're getting closer. With let's see here how we want to go. Well, let me ask this because this is an interesting question. There were several more on flight. Save that. Mary Jo had one. Did you excuse me? Did you ever fly any missions during which your instruments became faulty or unreliable due to weather, damage, a magnetic anomaly?
Fortunately, not. We had some pretty, if you look at today's instruments versus the instruments in the O2 and the OV10 back then, we had pretty rudimentary instruments.
Okay.
They were all self-contained. They weren't. We weren't relying on GPS or any kind of radio signals to tell us where we were. In fact, our navigation, we get to the general area with TACAN, and we were reading 1 to 50s. And
Wow.
in order to find targets and to identify where the targets are, we'd carry a bag full of 1 to 50,000s with us in the airplane. and read maps. We it was a low tech war back then compared to today.
Oh yeah, and I just honestly surprised speaking to you guys. Just how dead on you guys could get, and how y'all did it. Without GPS and all this newfangled fancy stuff. I mean,
No, we didn't have any of that stuff. I mean, to get a coordinate, you had to read a 1 to 50.
yeah, that my dad he didn't speak much, but he was like, if you couldn't read a map, you were ruined. I mean,
Yeah,
you were
you could
on the
not do the
ground
FAC
and
job without being a good map reader. In fact, my second tour, I was a combat instructor in the OV-10, and I had a few guys that came in that had flown, heavy iron in the Air Force,
Mhm.
couldn't read a map, couldn't read a map to save their ass, and we had to kind of put them aside, make sure they were flying with somebody who could.
And gosh, I find that. I mean, we hear ground command, fresh lieutenants and stuff not being able to read a map, and that's just wild, wild stuff. Hearing that, Jason
That
was
was one
curious.
thing I was pretty good at. Map reading from the air. I don't know. I'm pretty sure I would have much more difficulty doing it from the ground, like the recon teams were. But reading the map from the air, I was really good at.
Well, I mean, considering, I mean, theirs is dangerous too, and needing to know. But I mean, when you're putting ordnance in, not only yourself to mark, but also calling it in. I mean, you got to be on the money with that kind of stuff. So, absolutely, wow. Um, we've heard guys from the 219th talking about training their backseaters or people flying in the right side in case y'all went down. Did you do anything of the sort with Plaster or any
Yeah,
of the
yeah.
guys?
I tried to teach Pat Plaster how to land uh, at Contum. We made a couple of low approaches, and a thing I told him with the O2 is if I'm out of it and you got to land, don't worry about putting the gear down because you're going to hit the ground hard. You're going to bounce and kind of crash. Just skid it in because I had some pretty good skids on it, and uh, I I tried to talk him through a couple of low approaches, and I had about a 50-50 level of confidence that he might get us down on the ground in one piece.
Man, I that's got to be a little nerve wracking, not only for you, but especially a recon guy or any rider, and hoping, God, I hope that nothing happens up here, not only to me, but especially the pilot, to where I've got to get this bad boy down for both of our sake.
Yeah.
We've heard some of the guys were okay and could get it on the ground, but that
I
you really
I think
don't
he had
know
a
till
he,
you
he had a like I said a 50-50 chance of getting on the ground in one piece,
better than
which is
nothing.
which is better than nothing.
There you go. I'll take those odds, and I know you would have in the right
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah,
Uh,
later on when I was out of the Air Force, I got my uh, CSI, my commercial flight instructor, CFI commercial flight instructor license, and I did teach rookies, non aviators how to fly. So, but it usually took quite a few hours to get a person to the point where they could land it. And we didn't
yeah,
have that kind of time to really practice. It
uh,
was okay. Well, all right, we got enough fuel left over after this mission. We'll let you try a couple low approaches.
that's amazing. I'm glad y'all took the chance, because we've heard of not only the bird dog pilots and such, but also some of the chopper pilots letting some of the guys get stick time and learning how to fly a little bit. Learning, I
Yeah,
should
I
say.
went up with the helicopters at Camp Holloway once. I tried to learn how to hover, and I did not yeah, I had 15 minutes. They let me try to master hovering, and I said,
Yeah.
"Oh man, this has got to be easy. I know how to fly formation. I got to be able to fly formation on that telephone pole." But then everything gets reversed when you get in that situation. I never did figure it out. If I'd had to do it in a helicopter, I definitely would have. What I would have done was fly it into the ground under flying speed, not hovering speed. if I'd been in that position in a helicopter.
We've heard some scary tales, and I can't even for the life of remembering. But one of the Vietnamese guys was trying to teach one of the Americans to fly, and I think it may have been a pontoon, and they finally were like, coming back. They would let him fly back because he could fly, fly.
Mhm.
But when it came to landing or taking off, no, number 10, he ain't getting behind on the throttle.
If I had to fly a UE back, I would just fly it before the transition speed and just skid it in on the skids.
There you go. Coming in hot.
Yep.
Oh man, I love that. Oh, interesting. Did you fly any sort of missions, whether SOG or any other time where you were by yourself?
Oh yeah, yeah. But mostly in the primarily in the OV-10 on my second tour. Yeah, large majority of my missions in the OV-10 flying in support of the Cambodian army in '73 were solo missions.
Now, this is from God, the rain is bad here. Now, is that an OV-10?
That's an O2.
That's an
That's the
O2.
O2. Yeah.
Okay. I was
Um,
just curious.
Hang on, I can show you. I got a model of the OV-10. Let me just pick up my laptop here.
I think Oh, okay. Let's see if yours. Oh, yes. That is a beautiful piece of equipment right there.
There's a model of the OV-10.
And I believe there's your plaque too.
Yep,
That's awesome.
that's plaque from NKP. And over
Wow.
here is a big picture of an OV-10 on the
Oh,
ground.
wow. Yes. Wow, wow, wow. That is a beautiful piece of flying equipment right there.
The OV-10 is a beautiful airplane. That was the most fun airplane you could possibly fly. You could take that off on a dime, land it on a dime, fully acrobatic. Uh, Actually, one of the most fun missions you had on the OV-10 was what they called a functional check flight mission. After major maintenance, you had a routine. You take it up to 10,000 feet and you shut down an engine at a time and restart it, make sure that worked. And then what you wanted to do is shake it out to make sure nothing was loose. Because we had an ejection seat. If something was loose and it was uncontrollable, you could always bail. But you would point it straight down until you got 350 knots, which was the limiting speed on it. Then you'd pull it up into a 6G pull up until you got to 250 knots. And at 250 knots, you were by the operating manual, we were able to do full deflection aileron roll. So you do a full deflection aileron roll in both directions to try to shake things apart, and just in case everything wasn't put together right. So that was that was what we called that was what's known as the functional check flight, and that was a fun short mission you were flying just for maintenance purposes.
So, I mean, was the OV-10 light years ahead of the O2?
Oh yeah, it was a purpose built light attack and reconnaissance aircraft, and it had some cargo capabilities. The Marines used them. They actually dropped Marines out of it on parachutes. I actually have a friend here who was Marine Recon, not during the war. He's much younger than me, but he did it like in the '90s, and he jumped out of the back of an OV-10 several times.
That's what someone just asked. Did anybody ever jump out of the Bronco?
Yes.
Uh,
The Marine. I don't know if the Army ever did it, but the Marines did it on a regular basis because, like I said, I have a friend who was Marine Recon here where I live in Park City. He did that
Wow.
back in the '90s, and yeah, I think in the '90s.
That's pretty heavy duty. I mean, and it looks like it's got the perfect hatchback there to get a good jump out of. Wow. Um, and we had before we kind of transition here into speaking about something, you had brought up Lam Son, and this is actually a Hatchet Force group. Walt Shoemate, the famous Walt Shoemate, was
Oh
on this.
yeah,
But that's Paul Shepard and
yeah,
Paul Schurenberg, and they are on a blocking force. He mentioned that they were coming in from the north and either the east or the west, and SOG had a blocking force to make sure the South Vietnamese were going to be able to get their men out. So you were absolutely correct. SOG did have a few assets in the field
hmm
while you guys were flying. What was that? I know, like you said, I mean, it was hectic, and I've heard some pretty wild tales myself. How bad did it get? I mean, for you personally out there.
Well, that was the one time I almost got shot down. It was close as I get shot down. But I mean, it was really bad for the guys on the ground and the helicopter people. And I hate to say this, but there were some South Vietnamese units that were really good, and there were some that were really bad.
Oh yeah.
And it was my impression that a lot of them were just getting out there and hunkering down and letting us put TAC air around them.
Mhm.
And that's they weren't they didn't seem to be all that interested in being aggressive out there. I think unfortunately that if we'd had like an American division or two there, things would have been a lot different. But that wasn't possible at that time.
Yeah, well, we've spoken to one or two Lancers from the 101st, and they were a part of the Lam Son incursion, and one of the men actually mentioned he was shot down twice and went for a third bird, and they're like, "You've been down on the ground twice. We're not taking another chance.
Yeah.
You're done for the day." And
Yeah, like I said,
you,
my daughter did some research on that when she was in high school, and every one of the aircraft commanders in the 101st got shot down at least once.
boy, that's I mean, that's got to be nerve-wracking and kind of demoralizing there.
Yeah.
You're out there just getting knocked out of the sky left and right.
The I guess the ironic thing, I had a subscription to Time magazine. It used to be sent to me into Vietnam, and when I got back from Lam Son, I got an issue of Time magazine from a couple weeks earlier, and I'm hearing the propaganda from the DoD on that mission, and the Army was saying this shows the Lam Son 719 proved the effectiveness of helicopter assaults in a high threat environment. And I said, "Are you fucking kidding me?"
Jeez, I, I'm still surprised at stuff like that comes out because you speak to a vet much like yourself that was there or even in country and heard it from someone else how bad it went. It was just terrible,
As
terrible,
far as the
terrible.
Americans involved in Lam Son 719, the 101st Helicopter Pilots just got their ass kicked. It was a disaster for them.
I've seen footage of them, of you speaking of some of the bad Vietnamese units. I mean, I've seen videos of them having to fight dudes off from them leaving the field and trying to get on skids and the whole 9 yards. It's
Mhm.
just crazy, just crazy. Uh, Interesting question before we kind of speak about NKP and kind of close things up here. Uh, how would you compare your abilities and your emotions from your first SOG mission to that final SOG Halo mission that you flew?
Hmm. Well, yeah, and I guess my abilities were being honed over the entire year. You get a little bit better and a little bit better, but you also learn what your limitations are. I'd say in terms of the emotion part of it, uh, the more I worked with the special forces, the more dedicated I came to supporting them. So yeah, and I guess that last mission, yeah, to me, I was willing to do whatever I needed to do to help get them out.
Yeah, I mean, you had to. I mean, there you made it, so your skills must have been honed by that point in time. You know, to make it through
I
this.
will have to say I was a very good, I will say I was a very good combat pilot. I knew what I could get away with, and I flew the mission to the capabilities of the airplane. You know, one of the things that I did during that mission with Plaster, I also was using some of my knowledge from being an aeronautical engineering major. And there's a particular airspeed on every airplane. It's called a maneuvering speed, and that's the speed where you can make your tightest turns. It's not always it's not your fastest speed. It's not a slowest speed. It's a speed where you have the most ability to make a tight turn without stalling the airplane. And once we got into this situation where we were flying down this river valley, I was making sure that I was flying at maneuvering speed.
That's oh man. So well, we kind of haven't. Did we? No, I don't think we did. What when you ended up finishing your prairie fire work, shall we say, and I believe you said you went home on extension leave or
Well, actually, I got assigned to fly uh, T-39s, which is an Air Force passenger jet, and I did that for a year in Georgia. And I found that too boring after the first couple of months, so I volunteered for a second tour in OV-10s. And that's how I got to my second tour flying OV-10s out of NKP and Ubon, flying in support of the Cambodian Army. And then
wow.
after my second tour as an OV-10 driver, they stuck me back in T-39s again, but this time in Europe. And I had a lot of again flying a small passenger jet. The Saberliner is a 7-passenger jet, and had a lot of interesting missions there. I flew NATO staff into the fjords in Norway, where it's basic. You know, you get Norwegian air base where it's at the end of a fjord and it's one way in and one way out. Uh, I had one mission where I flew NATO staff over North Cape, so we were within miles of the Soviet at that time the Soviet aid is, and flew the Berlin Corridor. I got checked out as aircraft commander flying the Berlin Corridor on a regular basis, and
Wow.
that was pretty routine flying. You had to stay on course, but if you got off course more than 5 miles, you had the possibility of being shot down. And one of ours, about 10 years before I was there, one of our T-39s lost all electrical power and lost its navigation and got off course and got shot down. But basically, it was a fairly routine mission once you got checked out on it. Staying 5 miles on with a 5 mile buffer to be on course is uh, not a big deal as long as you have all your navigation equipment.
Well, that's
But those are years 73 or 74, 75. You know, flew over the Berlin Wall, flew over the Iron Curtain. Uh,
that's historic. That's amazing. I mean, I can
Another
what
interesting mission we had, we were actually helping to deliver F-5s to both Iran and Saudi Arabia at that time, because Iran was still an ally at that time. And the F-5s that were being built in the US for them didn't have VHF radios, so they couldn't talk to air traffic control across the Mediterranean. So we get a 4-ship of F-5s that come into Ramstein and meet us there, and then we'd fly out as a 5-ship, and the T-39 would lead a 5-ship down. We'd have to fly back over France because we couldn't fly over Switzerland at that time, but back over France, down through over Italy, landed Aviano, and then into Athens International, and then cross Turkey. Yeah, landed at Diyarbakir, which became a really big base during the Iraq War. But in the 70s, Diyarbakir was a hole in the wall. I remember going to base ops there, and the base ops latrine there was basically a hole in concrete.
Good
And then
Lord.
we flew on to Tehran and drop off a couple of F-5s with the Iranian Air Force, and then on to Dhahran in Saudi Arabia and drop off a couple of there. And interesting, looking back on it, the interesting part, you see where Iran is now, but Iran was a very westernized country back in the 70s. Walking in downtown Tehran, other than the fact that I couldn't understand what anybody was saying, you could have been in Los Angeles. It was
Women
that
in
kind of
skirts and
that kind of westernized city. And
I see photos on online of women in skirts, makeup, fixed up hair.
very westernized city in the 70s. Very westernized.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, that's so amazing. Not only there you are, passing the historic Eastern Bloc, the literally the Berlin Wall, and then seeing the old Middle East, shall we say, the old
Yep.
Iran. I mean, that's we'll touch base a little bit more on that because that's interesting. But I gotta ask, considering they like to say as far as Vietnam wise and such as that being directly involved, NKP was the most secret place on earth. How did you go from being out of the army and then joining up and immediately being able to say, I did you ask to go to NKP to fly, or did they see your
I was just
resume?
volunteering for a second tour. I wanted to fly the OV-10, and that's where I wound up. By the time I got there, the war was winding down in Vietnam. I got to NKP like a couple or 3 days before the Vietnam ceasefire.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
And we actually, the downside of that one was uh, we had two guys from the 23rd TAS shot down over the DMZ like a half hour before the ceasefire,
Mm, mm.
and they bailed out over the DM. They were shot down, bailed out over the DMZ, survived the bailout, and immediately executed by the North Vietnamese. Their bodies were found tied to a tree with their identification card nailed through their forehead.
Jesus Christ. And people ask and say, that they didn't commit atrocities. That's Hollywood and American propaganda. It's like, well, maybe you should spend time speaking to veterans and actually
Yeah,
find out what the NBA and the
they
VC
they
were.
were. I, in retrospect, I respect them because they were fighting for what they believed in. Uh,
Absolutely,
but
absolutely.
they were ruthless.
Brutal.
Uh, they were a ruthless opponent,
Brutal. I
absolutely
mean,
ruthless opponent.
yeah, yeah.
If we got shot, and what we found out later, we suspected during the war, if we got shot down over the Ho Chi Minh Trail,
Oh God.
uh, none of us came back. None of the FACs that got shot down over the Ho Chi Minh Trail came back. And what we found out after the war was, as part of the bomb loads we were putting in, some of them were delayed mines. And they would say, "Okay, I'll shoot you, or you can walk through the minefield you just dropped."
Oh
And
my
that's what
God.
was happening to pretty much all of the air crew that were shot down over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Uh, the eh, the negotiations they had at the time to end the war talked about the MIAs, and we had a fairly exaggerated number of MIAs there. We knew a lot of people were dead,
Mhm.
uh, and I think they were saying there was 800 MIAs in Laos at the end of the war that were unaccounted for. We got less than 10 back. I don't know what the exact number was, but it was single digits. And I'm sure, I put in an airstrike one night from some F4s. I think they were out of Da Nang, some gunfighters, and the lead got target fixation and hit the ground. And because his body was not recovered during the war, I suspect technically he was listed as MIA at that point. But I mean, we all saw what
MIA
happened.
BNR probably.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I, I was I was talking to two after lead went in. I cleared lead in hot, and I say the splash, and they had checked in with like wall-to-wall Mark 82s, 500-pound bombs, and I saw the splash. Lead, you didn't tell me you had napalm, and then two come up.
Uh,
That was lead.
mm. And it's and it makes it all the more difficult if y'all happen to be over the border and families trying to figure out more.
Yeah,
That's always the same with the men on the ground.
and
And
I'm sure little or nothing was recovered of that particular crew because I actually, in my last tour in Europe, I was flying safety officer in my squadron, and I was on two fatal accident investigation boards, and one of them was an F4 crash at high speed, low altitude, and a day later, we're out there with plastic garbage bags, and the medical examiner says, "Pick up anything that looks like flesh," and there was nothing identifiable. When an F4 hits the ground at 500 knots flat,
it's nothing
there's
left.
there's nothing left.
God, and that's another thing about you guys. I mean, y'all are doing something that humans aren't supposed to be doing. No matter what you're in, you're flying. Y'all. That the little joke they make about helicopters, they're beating the air into submission to fly. I,
Yeah, Air Force fixed wing pilots used to call them 5,000 miscellaneous parts flying in close formation with each other.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm gonna have to remember that one. I mean, I know y'all know because the war has been going on so long. I mean, and speaking back to what they were doing, I mean, not to be so morose, but did you do anything in preparation? And God forbid if you ever went down, were you gonna do it yourself, or were you gonna try and run like hell and get as close as you could to an
Oh, yeah,
American?
we pretty much knew what we were going to do because we knew what was going on down there, and we carried a six shot 38 with us, and we pretty much all said it was if we were going to get captured, it was going to be five for them and one for me.
Wow.
I was not going to be captured.
Yeah. No. No.
I think
Absolutely not.
being a POW was I dreaded being a POW. I did not want to be a POW under any circumstances. Those guys went through hell for years and years and years. And anybody who criticizes them for being, can kiss my ass.
Yeah, I've heard, or I've not, I have heard, but I've read some of the more intense, to where they weren't worried about the TV and scaring people too much. I mean, I've read stuff that literally made me cry about what some of those men went through, both mental torture and physical
Yeah.
torture. It just would, it's
We,
it
we
just
knew we were not going to be treated well and we were going to die anyhow and it was going to be a painful death and over the trail. And pretty much there was very few of us who were not were, were going to be willingly taken prisoner. It was I was saving one shot for me, and most of my comrades were also. If it had turned out that way,
We can, yeah, absolutely, and we've heard it from the other pilots as well. They said the same thing. There ain't no way I'm going to a prison. No chance in hell. Um, the a question before we kind of get to the ending of your career to touch base a little bit on before we close out. We're always curious about what, and I've got a great picture to go along with this. And we also hear stories about the pilot or you guys getting close with maybe Plaster or a SOG Recon man or what have you, and getting some weapons. Did you have? You mentioned your 38 right then. But did you have any other weapons that maybe you got from Plaster or you
uh,
scrounged up or
I did not, and I didn't bring anything back with me either. Yes.
not sure who that is? I don't have a name. I just got a
I
photo.
If you knew the name, I think it would ring a bell because I knew there was a guy, one of the guys in ours at Play Coup always flew with an M16.
Oh
Always.
wow.
we all had them in our lockers.
Oh, that's actually a Car 15 he's
Yeah,
got.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
We were issued standard Air Force Army M16s that we kept in our locker in case the base got overrun because Pleiku was basically surrounded by the NVA when and the yeah in
Go-
Charlie when American troops had already pulled out of Pleiku when I was stationed at Pleiku. So we all had our flak vests and steel pots and M16s in our lockers in, in case things went bad. But I
and
never flew with one.
wow, that's wild.
I mean, getting out of an O2 and trying to carry that, bailing out of an O2 was
Hard
very,
enough.
very difficult. If the O2 was shot up so it was uncontrollable, you were not bailing out. It wasn't happening because you had to unstrap yourself and climb out through a door. Uh, if if you had an engine shot out and you were going down in a controlled manner and you could get away from the trail and trim it up so you could have time to climb over the because a lot of them only had one door, so the pilot was on away from the door. Some of the newer ones had an ejectable door on the pilot side, but not all of the O2s. If you were flying one of the older O2s, you had to trim it up, uh, unstrap yourself from the seat, push the passenger seat out of the way, open the door, and dive out of the airplane. It was not going to be a quick exit. And if the plane was uncontrollable at all, you weren't getting out. And in my book, you certainly weren't carrying any kind of long rifle with you. Wasn't happening.
Wow, jeez Louise. We've heard some other guys they carried grenades and all kind of stuff either for if they got on the ground or to
Yeah,
throw.
well, actually, we did carry grenades on night missions sometimes. Yes,
Did I hear some of the
just
other
just so
they
we could throw them out of the airplane, just to
okay.
harass the guys on the ground. But yeah, we would occasionally carry some grenades with us.
Did Plaster or any of the Saw guys did they carry anything they throw out any tricks on
Not
the
during the missions, but I'm sure Plaster was uh, fully supplied.
strapped up and ready to go?
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, this is a great question concerning the logo we just saw. How did y'all adopt Snoopy?
Oh, I had no idea. I mean, I was there 6 years into the war. Uh, that squadron patch, was probably, yeah, somebody who had an artist ability in the first year.
I like that because Snoopy and then one of the guys that would end up sadly losing his life was known as Woodstock because he looked like Woodstock,
Yeah.
who flew SOG missions. A very good man. Um,
Well, the 23rd test, one of their patch had cricket on it because one of their early call signs was cricket. So it was the Disney character cricket
Jiminy
on the
Cricket, yes,
parachute.
sir.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I'll
Cricket
have
was
to
one,
look.
when I was there, when I was at 23rd, our call signs were nail and rustic, but early on in the war, there was a cricket FAC.
I thought I saw that in one of my old books. Okay, Cricket Fact. Nail and Rustic also. I've got that written
I
down.
actually I can show you that patch also. Hang on a second here.
Oh wow, okay. Let's see here.
Yeah, right.
Oh, wow. I love that. Oh, there it is. Wow, that is awesome.
There's a 23rd patch, the cricket.
Holy cow. That is wonderful, sir. Absolutely wonderful.
And this one over here, the at the end of the war, the 20th was merged in with the 23rd, and the 20th guys had uh, the top patch here, the Cubby's nail sharpening team,
That is so I love those designs. Those are amazing.
and that was our Cubby Play Coup patch.
Gosh. gosh. And would those be on the party suits that y'all had?
Yeah. Yep.
That is wonderful. We love seeing y'all in the party suits, and as a matter of fact, I'll think I've got, yeah, there's the party suits right there, guys, with their logos. And oh, that's Mr. Paul for another show. They've got their war medallions on. Well, you can see those better in the other, but there's their patches right there for
Yep.
a little get together they're having. And I'll bring up the class photo, and then we've got a great question we'll get ready to close out on here. But here is the whole gang here.
Yep.
Home of the Highland Coveys, 20th TAS. And if we zoom in right here, we will see Mr. Glenn right there.
Yep.
And if you see everybody, they've got their rather large war emblems, not like the SOG
Yes.
guys with the smaller. These guys went above and beyond with theirs. That's them with the Bronco.
Still got mine.
Oh my God. That is too cool, sir. Oh,
Go back to that picture though. I got to tell you a story about one of the guys in that picture.
let's
You want to
see.
talk about somebody who cheated death?
Let me pull that up. Hang on
Yeah.
1 second. Where 20th, 20th. Okay, you're gonna mess with me here. No,
Yeah,
that's
got to tell you this
Tad.
one story about one guy who really cheated death in an OV-10.
There we go.
You want to
Okay,
talk about luck?
here we go. Sorry about that, guys. And boom, there we go.
Okay, now move blow it up a bit, blow it up a bit more. Okay, now go left, go left. Okay, down, 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 left a little bit more, left a little, yeah, right there. Guy named Gene Rose, OV-10 pilot. He got shot up over the trail, lost an engine, had really bad damage to one engine on the OV-10. And instead of coming back to play coup, he decided to go to Da Nang because they had a longer runway there and better recovery capabilities. So he tries to land single engine at Da Nang, and he gets all the way down to short final and loses control of it. And the plane starts to roll and sink. And so he punches out. And the ejection seat and the vectors all canceled out. His sink rate, his roll rate, the upward motion of the rocket ejection seat on the OV-10, which had a really great ejection seat. It all canceled out. He was so close to the ground, he slid across the grass between the runways at Da Nang. He was so low, the parachute never came out, and he walked away from it with a sprained ankle.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
I mean, the timing on his ejection was perfect. A split second later or a split second earlier, and he's probably dead. But the vectors of the ejection seat and the roll and the sink rate of the airplane completely canceled out, and he slid across the grass.
holy moly. That is a beyond close one. That's pucker factor inducing just hearing about that. Wow. Oh, Mary Jo, since you had spoke about post Vietnam flying and your Saudi F5 story and all of that, she was curious. Did you ever get to do any test flying per your original ambition?
No, I didn't. I actually got out after 6 years. It turned out I was a pretty good combat pilot, but I was a fairly shitty officer. And I got in a lot of trouble being drunk and disorderly when I wasn't flying missions, and I decided that it was time to leave the Air Force after 6 years.
Well,
I have to admit I was not at that particular point in my life I was not good officer material.
With 6 years in and all that you were doing, what did you end up retiring out as?
Well, I didn't retire. I just separated and I got a
Oh,
corporate job. I never really wanted to fly for the airlines. I went to a headhunter and I have an engineering degree, like I said, in aeronautical engineering.
oh,
And I'd
oh,
been a flying safety officer in my last squadron. And the headhunter had me interview for some industrial safety positions. And I
oh,
worked for an insurance company as a industrial safety and fire protection and security consultant for about 30 years. And I
wow.
worked in Los Angeles and Boston and New Jersey. And my last 12 years, I was in charge of all of our people doing that job in Latin America. I traveled everywhere from Mexico to Chile, Punta, from basically from the Mexican border to Punta Arenas, and
Wow.
lots of interesting places during the 90s and 2000s. Almost got kidnapped once by the FARC in Colombia.
Oh,
But that's a whole different story. I was on an assignment there to go look at some post earthquake damaged ruins, and flew into Cali, and had about a 3 hour drive across to a place called Palmyra, and we get about an hour into the trip, and we get a cell phone call and said, "Where are you?" Okay, turn around because the FARC's about a half hour in front of you, and they're stopping all vehicles and checking IDs.
oh, Lord. That,
We we actually got a briefing from our security people when we started that job, because when we started the job in the 90s, there was a lot of guerrilla activity going on all over Latin America, particularly in
oh,
Colombia, where
oh,
we
yeah.
did a lot of work. And Colombia is a really nice country, really competent people, good, very good business community there and civilian community. But the we had our company provided kidnap ransom insurance for people for companies, and basically the big companies didn't need the ransom; they needed the ransom services. So we hired a company to do that. We're basically all old special forces and Navy SEAL and CIA guys,
Wow.
and we had our interview with them shortly after we started the zone, and they came in and said, "Well, okay, if you get kidnapped, don't do anything stupid. We will come for you with a bag of money. Dress down. If you're fluent in the language, speak the language. If you're not fluent in the language, keep your mouth shut. Don't wear any expensive jewelry. Look in, in, inconspicuous.
Incognito. Yeah.
But if you do get kidnapped, don't do anything stupid. We'll come get you with a bag of money."
Wow. Holy cow. Oh, don't do anything stupid. We'll get the bag of money.
And Colombia was a hairy place at that time. I remember some years I'd travel there about 4 times a year, and
I
for
mean, this is
several of
just
those
when
years,
Pablo's died.
there was army soldiers in every corner in Bogota and Cali and Medellin.
Yeah, I mean, isn't this a few years after Pablo had died and the
I was
Cali
there when
cartel?
Pablo got captured. Yes, and died.
Wow.
In fact,
Okay.
I was out for dinner with some clients in Cali, and Pablo was part of the Medellin cartel.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, we're sitting at this outdoor restaurant, and there's fireworks going off in Cali and celebrations. So I
Because
asked the
Cali.
people I was with, and they looked on their cell phone and said, "Oh, they just killed Pablo Escobar. So now the Cali cartel's in control."
Yeah. And it's fun. What a group they were, two businessmen, and they ended up having no problem stepping into Pablo's shoes. Not quite as evil, if you will, but nonetheless spreading evil all around the world with what they were selling. But okay, it sounds like you it didn't matter from if you were in Southeast Asia or in South America. You were you were living a pretty exciting life there for a while.
I had an interesting life. Yes, I have had an interesting life.
Holy moly! Well, before we'll see on that. How long before after this? What did you keep on working for a while? How soon before you retired and decided to
I
enjoy
got
it?
a corporate early retirement about 17, 18 years ago. 2000,
Wow. Okay.
19 years ago now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, with that, how would your what out of all of the flying you've done, military with SOG or the Air Force flying the jets for everyone, and then your post military flying and such, would you have a most hairy situation that stuck out to you? Is it the shoot down, or do you have anything else? Another instance to where you that just sticks out to your mind as being a hairy flight, both weather wise or anything of the other sort?
Oh, the top two were definitely that SOG mission and the time I almost got shot down in Lam Son. Those are definitely the top two. There were a
Yeah,
few others that were interesting, but a lot of what you did was fairly routine stuff. Yeah, you get shot at and missed. Yeah, no big deal. We fly night missions, and you'd see the enemy aircraft fire coming up, and if it wasn't close,
keep on going.
no big deal.
Jeez Louise, that I can't even imagine what night flying over the trail must have looked like with all the guns coming up at y'all. It must have been like a laser
It
light
was
show.
well, the flashback I got on that was when the Iraq War started, and you saw the anti-aircraft fire coming up over Baghdad.
That is
Oh, I
a
remember that.
Yeah, I was about to say that is an amazing piece of scenery right there. I mean, that's I can only imagine what the trail. I just wish y'all would have had better cameras like all the guys had today and the GWatt and all of that. I can only imagine the photos and pictures. Y'all did get good photos for what you had, but the videos y'all could have taken in
No,
those cockpits would
we
have
we
been.
were definitely low tech. Although
Oh,
on the second tour in the OV-10, we had 100 aircraft in our squadron, and 6 of them were modified with the first laser designators.
is that Pavla or
Yeah, the paved nail project. Yeah,
okay? Okay,
yeah. But the
guys,
laser
if you
designator was about as big as this desk I'm sitting at right now, that swung underneath the airplane, and you had to fly a very controlled arc around a target while the guy in the back seat slaved the laser in the other direction.
Ooh, wow. I didn't
But it
realize
was
it was
good.
quite.
I mean, that was the earliest version of that. Like I said, it was about as big as this desk I'm sitting at right now. And we had a reunion with one of the Predator squadrons, and the equivalent technology now is in a ball like this and a lot more accurate.
I mean, that's guys. They're great book. There's two books in the series. This is "Hit My Smoke" by Jan Churchill, Forward Air Controllers in Southeast Asia,
Yeah, I
covers
think I got that one.
ratings and a great big section on special forces. But the PAVE, as it's listed here, the PAVE nail is the code name for the night observation system using laser guided bombs pointed at targets used for F4 locking onto beams. I mean
Yep.
that's pretty high tech for back in the day, right there.
Yeah. And we used them in Laos against gun positions.
Ah, okay.
Because you could see our gun revetment. Yeah, they were basically dug in. You had
Yeah,
to put the Mark 82 in the pit with them, and you could do that with the LGB.
that's amazing, and I imagine it's like you said. How long with that lock on? Do you have to keep it until it hits, or do you paint it? Okay,
Yes,
wow,
they
heavy
had to
duty,
keep it on there until it hits.
heavy
That was
duty.
the early version of it.
Wow, that's still that's pretty heavy duty right there. That's
Yeah,
very interesting. Wow.
that
Um,
was 1972 and 73. That's how early that stuff was. Those are the very first versions of that stuff.
man. But coming into Vietnam and it only progresses and gets better and better to what we're, using today. So uh
Yep.
um did you we're about here to the end, we're an hour and a half or so. Did you have anything you'd like to close out with for today?
Yeah, I think we I guess I told my share of war stories today, and thank you for doing, kind of documenting all this stuff. And just to say again, working with the SOG guys was the high point of my 6 year career. I never interacted with a better, braver, more dedicated group of people.
And they say the same about y'all, even though some of them they don't have never met any of y'all. Others have been lucky enough to meet some of y'all, but they all, no matter what, think highly and speak highly of y'all. We think that may be
I think
Mr.
that
Glenn
might be
right
me,
there
yes.
at a party where you can see Mr. Plaster got caught in a deep think situation. But that's what I love, you guys getting together, hearing about that. And it's the same thing. They absolutely worship the grounds you men walk on, because like I said earlier, without y'all and y'all's passengers helping out, a lot more SOG men would be stuck in Laos, sadly. And it's an honor to now protect, to learn y'all's story, to preserve y'all's stories, and eventually protect y'all's stories when y'all pass on, and we're here trying to do what we can for the Vietnam veterans legacy.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, old guys don't have too many more years left in us.
well, we sure ain't wishing you or speeding that up. We're hoping all y'all can keep rocking and rolling for as long as possible with us. I was gonna see, if we can work it out and you'd be open to it. I'm doing my dangdest to see about getting Howard to maybe sit in with you, or maybe have you and Paul on to and Howard to have both air and ground covered in one show. If
Mhm.
you'd be interested, we'd love to have all of y'all on if you'd be open to it.
Yeah, I'd be open to it. It all depends when we can schedule it.
Excellent. We'll get that. If I can get it in the works, we'll get the scheduling down and make sure we can work something out. But as far as it goes, I think we've had a great show, and we'll close it out here. I'll see you guys later on, and you be good, and thank y'all for joining.